Hello, hello. If you can hear us okay, please give us a hello in your Indigenous language or a simple hi. We're going to get started. Unfortunately, Phil Lane Jr. was not able to join us yet. We hope that he's able to join us remotely maybe a little bit later. That'd be great. Thank you so much. Thanks for your messages. I want to welcome everyone. Welcome to the UBC Learning Circle. I want to tell you a little bit about us and our team. We are based out of the Center for Excellence in Indigenous Health, and we'd like to respectfully acknowledge that we are located on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Musqueam people. The Learning Circle is a program featuring workshops on First Nations mental, spiritual, physical, and emotional health and wellness, and it prioritizes First Nations knowledge sharing amongst health professionals, community members, elders, students, and youth. The UBC Learning Circle is generously funded by the First Nations Health Authority. A little bit about me really quickly. My name is Aurelia Kinslow. I'm the Education Coordinator and at the UBC Learning Circle. I'm also a PhD candidate in the Faculty of Education, and my heritage is Cherokee, Choctaw, African American, Scandinavian. Thanks so much. I want to welcome our wonderful guest, Corinne Stone. She is a member of the, help me?
Chilcotin
Anaheim Band from the Williams Lake Band. And this session, we want to embark on a spiritual journey with our guests. They describe this moment in human history as unique and unprecedented, and filled with restlessness and uncertainty, which it certainly is. Part of what will be discussed today is the unnamed rootlessness that permeates the very heart of the human family and condition. And to reclaim and embrace our Indigenous relationship to all life by celebrating our sacred relationship to Earth. I'm very excited for this session. Thanks so much. Welcome, Corinne.
Up and honest, everyone. Again, my spiritual name is Blue Sage Woman. I'm Chilcotin and Shuswap, originally from Williams Lake. I work down here in Mission. I work with the men and the brothers in the prison. Grateful to be here today, and I know that if Phil's able to come in, he will join us. I know he's a very busy man, so I'm grateful to be trained actually by Phil back in 1992. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the 16 principles and bring you to your package. I'm sure that all of you will be able to you can download For World Development's package that they have, and they have the 16 principles as part of the package. He also has a connection to his website, so you can download all of his material there. And if you don't know where that is, they'll let you know at the end how to get to it. But I'm going to start out and talk about my bundle. One of the things that back in 1992, there was probably 80 of us that started to train around the province, and Phil was our trainer. He was our elder for what was called Advanced Training in the Healing Arts, Human and Community Development. And so we were trained as facilitators. And we started out doing with the 16 principles that we're going to cover today and applying them to our own life and healing. And so all through my work that I've done, and I've done quite a bit of work in the Aboriginal community since I think I started in 1985. I'm going to start in the East. In the East is the direction of the child. And when we were first learning about the healing arts, we had to go back and look at our history in the East. And the East is represented by the eagle. And the eagle is said to fly the highest to bring our prayers to the Creator. Each and every nation, no matter where, there's many that the eagle feather is very sacred. And so I carry this eagle fan. I heard some of you talking about from Lillooet there. Both me and Phil do our Sundance up there in Lillooet. Last year was our first year, or this year was our first year. And we're dancing in Fountain. And so if any of you that want to come down and join us, you were also talking about Taya. That's our chief, Reuben George's daughter, and she dances up there with us. So we use the eagle fan. I use the eagle fan. I'm a traditional jingle dress dancer, which helped me in my healing. One of the principles that I'm going to talk about is no vision, no development. And when we first started our training, we had to do our own personal vision. And so in 1992, my vision was to become a traditional dancer, one of them. I came from a lot of alcohol and drugs, violence, grew up with a lot of that in my home and needed to heal. And so I didn't know who I was as an Aboriginal woman. And I was very lost. And I came across, I moved from my hometown to downtown East Side Vancouver. And drinking on the streets down there at Main and Hastings. And I also worked down there in a place called Blood Alley, right off of Hastings and Water Street, for a place called United Native Nations Local 108. And so I started meeting elders. And by 1992, I had been probably about 2 years sober. And I met Phil for this training that we did over 2 years. And my vision, we had to pick 4 things. And so the second one was that I wanted to become a traditional dancer. I wanted to get my name. My name is Blue Sage Woman. It means the sage the spirits use when they come down on earth. And I didn't exactly know what that meant, but when the elders said, that's what your name means, I knew that as a little girl, the abuses that I went through, I used to dream. And I would see in my dreams the other side. And so I knew that it had something to do with that as part of my healing. The other thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to get my degree. Well, 1992, in 2015, I got my master's. So it took me that long. But I had a lot of great teachers. Phil was one of the elders that found me, adopted me, and has taught me. I have other elders that have helped me within this territories and on my healing journey. The other, when I first got my name, I was, in 1992, I was just getting my status. I was Bill C-31. And a lot of things were happening at that time. So I had to, part of the healing arts was to heal yourself. You can't help anybody until you heal yourself. And of course, the first part of that was sober up and clean up. And was an alcoholic and drug addict. And so I had to just sober up. And in the beginning, in those days, AA and NA, that's the time of Hayway Nook, and I remember Lorraine Brave and many other people, Jane Milton Moss, they talked about the 12-step programs. And so the 12-step programs, I always say, saved my life. And when Phil said, he was asked by an elder, what is the most sacred ceremony of all ceremonies? And the elder said, he named off all these ceremonies: Sundance, Fast, Sweat Lodge, Big House. And the elder said, no, the most sacred ceremony of all ceremonies is the birth of a child. You are sacred. And in my work, that's what I remind each and every person that I work with, from the people down in the downtown east side to in the prison system. I've worked with a lot of family violence and residential school survivors. And I remind them that they're sacred. We weren't born violent. Some of the things that we pick up as we have gone through the history of our colonization, the history of the residential school, the foster care system. Today I work with a lot of young men in the prison systems, and they're all hurting, and they've come from a lot of pain. And I remind them that they were sacred. They're sacred. In the East, where the child is born, they're born pure, right from the spirit world. And one of the sisters in our, I worked in the women's prison, federal women's prison. She made this little doll, and so I keep it in my altar to remind me that children are sacred. And as we go around my bundle to the south is the animal that's represented is Grandmother Mouse. And Phil shares a story with us when we first started about the Creator gave us. He wanted to give human beings a very special gift, and it was the gift of spirituality. And he called all the animals together and he said, where can I hide this gift that will give me, well, only where those that are seeking the truth and are going to help others will find it. And the eagle came and said, well, give it to me, Creator, and I'll fly it to the highest place in the sky. And the Creator said, no, one day they're going to fly into the sky and they'll find it. And the buffalo said, give it to me and I'll hide it in the deepest grass in the prairie. And the Creator said, no, one day they're going to dig it and toll the grass in the prairie for food and they'll find it. And the bear said, give it to me and I'll hide it in the deepest cave in the earth. And the Creator said, no, one day they're going to dig into the earth for the minerals and they'll find it. So Grandmother Mouse stood up in her little shawl and she said, Creator, I know where you can hide it, where only those that are seeking the truth and are going to help others will find it, inside. And so we take that journey from our mind to our heart. And the brothers that are hurting, that I work with inside, I tell them it's a long journey. It's the journey that I had to take when I first sobered up, to work on grief. Grief's one of the first things that we work on when we are healing. As soon as I take those things that medicated me, whether it be alcohol, drugs, today we have gambling, sex, relationships, all the addictions. Once you take, that medication away, then you need to deal with underneath. And when I, heard the story of Grandmother Mouse, I knew that by that time I had been introduced to Sundance, and I started to fast on the mountain. And that first time when I went up on the mountain, I went up out in Chihuahua, up on the mountain, and you stay and you pray and you sit with yourself for 4 days and 4 nights. And I knew that all the time that I was up there, I mostly cried and prayed and cried. And I didn't realize how healing it was. When I got into doing my my Sundance, I had to do a lot of, what I'm teaching the men today is, when we're going from that child to that youth, we're developing. Well, a lot of the times when we're hurt, traumatized, things that happen to us in this age, it stops our growth. And so when I was 30 by the time I sobered up and cleaned up. So I had to grow myself up, parent myself, learn and reach out and grab some of the elders that were around that could love me unconditionally without judgment. And so as I was healing myself and growing myself up, that guidance of the community. And by then, East Vancouver was my community. I moved away from my home when I graduated, and so I had to adopt. My Sundance family became my family. My AA family became my family. I continued to go home every year, and continued to. They say that when I hear about inside, it's also that connection, I think, with our spirit, our land. And each year I went home and I would fish. And in 1985, my first son was born. I lost my first son in 2015 to the first fentanyl. He was one of the first deaths for fentanyl. And you know, he taught me a lot in those years. He was born, they say that we're given 4 teachers in our life. Our first teacher is children. Our second teacher is women. Our third teacher is the elders. And our fourth and our hardest of all teachers is experience. And so the young men that I work with, some of them are, you know, the youngest one I work with right now is 21. And they're still learning. They're still learning, and they need that love. It's one of the basic teachings. I'm going to, you know, as I go around the circle, talk about, I talked about the animals. One of the animals on the west is the bear. And all of the 16 principles, which I'll be getting into a little bit more, Phil isn't able to join us. Hindsight. The bear teaches us about hindsight. And that I had to go back and learn about my history. By grade 8, I didn't even know that I was Aboriginal. I didn't know that the children were coming out of the residential school, St. Joseph's Mission in my area by the time I reached grade 8. And so I didn't know why a lot of the young women were they were mad at me. And there was a lot of, they were wanting to fight me. And I had to find out, you know, my mom, she was from Talatinko or Anaheim. She didn't ever talk about that. My grandpa went to residential school. He was going to become a priest. He graduated from residential school. Not too many do. And I didn't know that. And so I had to find out, you know, I remember my grandpa, before he passed away, he was in a tractor's accident, I think in 1969. And he, what I remembered about him was that he would go to bed with a bottle of gin and wake up in the morning, it would be gone. And I didn't know where all that hurt came from. I didn't know. My dad, I guess, had gone to residential school. It was a day school for 3 months. I didn't know that till he passed away in 1998. And so I had to learn about what happened in my community. I had to learn about, you know, 6 of my chiefs were hung in 1862, you know, and what happened with my grandmother. She left the reserve, and she was called a white woman because she married a non-Aboriginal person. And you know, my relatives would say, don't go with anybody west of the Fraser because they're all related to you. And as I was doing my healing, I was working down in Nanaimo, and I remember this one woman I was talking to, and I was telling her a little bit about my story. And my sons are from Nanaimo, their dad is from Nanaimo Bad. And she said our grandmothers were very intelligent. She says they knew the importance of mixing blood. I'm also Chilcotin Shuswap. I'm German, Dutch, and Scottish, I think. And I had to be able to embrace both sides, be able to walk in 2 worlds. And so I had to learn about that history. And that was one of the things that, you know, when Phil was, when we first did the healing arts training back in 1992, and we went over the 16 principles, that was part of it. We had to go back, and he had came to my territory to Alkali. My father, my grandmothers are from Alkali, and Phil had come and did a Healing the Hurts, it was called, back in 1979, and he had showed that video to us. And it's the first time that I had seen how much hurt came out of residential school, still just learning about, that my grandpa had gone there, and, wondering why, my dad was so angry, and my mom, there was lots of violence between my mom and dad. And so I had to learn about that. And part of, when I learned I took the principles and started to, after we did a national conference in 1994 where 20 of us graduated out of the 80, and I started using it in the work that I do. I started to develop this I was doing a traditional parenting program in New Westminster at a place called Urban, and I used a lot of the work that we did within those 2 years to help develop first that traditional parenting program. But when I had first met Phil, one of the first things that I had to admit was that I was abusive. And so a lot of the work that I did from 1989 to I think probably 1994, 1992 maybe, as we did research on family violence. And we helped develop Helping Spirit Lodge in Vancouver, a transition house for battered women. And so I used a lot of the things that I was learning from Phil and these 16 principles, heal yourself. My sobriety date is November 14th, because we opened our house, Helping Spirit Lodge, on November 13th, and we had a gathering, to open with BC Housing and all these people to celebrate opening our house. And they had pushed a glass of wine in front of me, and I had no power at that time. I picked up that glass of wine, and so the next day, because I knew that I wanted to work with women that were in abusive relationships, and I wanted to do that, so I sobered up, and that was one of the reasons. My son, by that time, I had my second son, and so hindsight is very important in our healing. And in the north, I have this is one of the my friend. It's been beaten over the years because it was my would go down to South Dakota and fast every year. It's part of our Sundance, and one of my Sundance sisters, she's Niska, she gave me this rattle. It used to have a handle and it used to have another ear, but I carry it because the wolf, another person that really taught me a lot was late Vera Manuel, and she taught us family systems training, Aboriginal family systems training, and talked about how the wolf, teaches us. The wolf is one of my helpers, and when I was first, I didn't realize that I had post-traumatic stress disorder from all of the abuse that I had gone through as a child, sexual abuse. And I remember, as the elders were teaching me, one of my elders, his name is late Dave Peranto, he told me, I want you to come and do a workshop on post-traumatic stress disorder. And I said, what is that? And he said, you'll find out when you do the research on it and come and do a workshop. And so I did that, and I first found out about that time, 1995. I went to a healing conference over in Saskatchewan, and I heard an elder named Jane Middleton Moss talk about PTSD and working with the Army veterans that have come back from the Vietnam War. I'd like to acknowledge, yesterday was National Aboriginal Veterans Day. She talked about PTSD and what that meant. And when I was working down in downtown East Side at Blood Alley, I remember one day this guy really scared me. He came in, and was one of the street people, and a vehicle went and backfired out in the alley, and he just hit the ground, and he was going along like this, and he just scared me because I was there by myself, and I didn't know what that was. But over the years, I've taken training with Shirley Turcott called Aboriginal Complex Trauma and Focusing, and a lot of the things that I had learned about going inside, about healing myself, I use today in my work, and a lot of the teachers that I work with, have worked with over the years. I continue to touch base, and wherever Phil is, I always want to go and see him, see what he's doing now, and I am always learning. In the north, that white wolf would come when I was going through. We had, in our training, we had 13 elders, and they used to sit around and pray while we were doing whatever work we were doing. I remember we were doing this work with our breath, healing with our breath, and we would get to a place where Phil would come and he'd work on me. He'd have an eagle fan. He'd be pressing on my stomach or on the back of my legs, and those elders would be sitting there praying. And I remember, because I didn't want to look at, that hurt from my past. And I remember that white wolf would come, and it would curl up right here. And when we're doing that healing work, I always, on the first day of our Sundance, we call in our ancestors, our helpers, and I always call that white wolf in, and that white wolf comes pounding in there, jumps up on me, and I can just imagine it, and it helps me. It helps me to get through whatever I've had to go through in order to heal. And so I always encourage the people that I'm working with, to believe in and listen to the elders, because they have a lot to share about how we heal, and we can't help others. I just went to, I think it was in September, I went and revisited Round Lake. They had a week for colleagues, and I encourage you, if you're working in the field, always, it's one of the 16th principle is, be the change you want to see. Be that person that you want. I remember 1992, I went over to, I think it was 1990, we went over to Mama Wichita in Winnipeg. We were doing research on family violence, and at the time Oka was going on, and just after that, we went to a conference when we were developing Helping Spirit Lodge in London, Ontario. And I heard this elder talk. His name's Art Solomon. And he said, before him there was a speaker, and this woman was asking him a question, and she said, I don't know what to do. I'm helping this woman, and she's in a fetal position on the ground, and I don't know what to do. And he said, you can only take someone where you've gone before. And I remembered that. I heard Art Solomon, and he said, he was at a family violence conference, and all these women were complaining, men did this and men did that and men did that. And he said to them, who raised those men? You. He said, it's time to pick up your medicine and heal the sick and wounded world. And the women asked him, what's our medicine? He said, yourselves. You need to pick up yourself. So I always remember, those little teachings. They come back to me when I first had gone to, I tried in 1979 when I went to college. I was going to take social work because I wanted to help people, even though I was very broken. And at the time, it wasn't the right time. I was the only Aboriginal woman in College New Caledonia in Prince George, and it felt very strange. And the things that I was learning, I had too much issues to learn. And so when I think about when I got my master's a couple of years ago, our whole class was Aboriginal. You know, we learned from the elders' teachings. I used all of the work that I've been doing throughout my healing as part of my learning. That's what I was able to bring forward. And so Phil was very instrumental in that, in bringing that, and throughout the years, as I went back to my community and helped develop a child and family organization. Phil was always there, you know, cheering me on. I would use all of the 16 principles to help me. So I'm going to go into a little bit of those principles and see if Phil's joined us yet.
We'll take a look.
This is the first page.
I don't believe he has yet.
Okay. So principle number 1 is human. Can they see the flip chart or the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
And you can control it there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So principle number 1, human beings can transform their worlds. You know, working in the institution, you know, working with the broken of all broken, you know, some of them have committed murder, some of them have committed, you know, horrible offenses because of the hurt that they've gone through. It was really important for me to believe this first principle, that human beings can transform their worlds. You know, I work with people that have been, it's hard, and you get burnt out. I know working in the community, I've been burnt out a few times working in the field, because my passion is working with people that are residential school survivors, sexual abuse survivors, family violence survivors. And so you need to believe the web of our relationships with others and the natural world, which has given rise to the problems we face as human beings, can be changed. And I didn't believe, you know, back in when I was drinking and drugging, that I could ever be anything, even to myself, without or to a child. But the work that I've done using these principles over the years, you know, helping to develop, helping Spirit Lodge, helping develop traditional parenting programs. In 2007, I think it was, I won the National Aboriginal Women in Leadership Award for wellness. And I never believed that I could heal. When I went, before I started working in the prison in 2012, the year I lost my sister to cancer, she, I didn't even think that I could get into university with the knowledge that I had. So I had to believe that can change, and that the people that I'm going to be that I work with can change. And I think it's a really important principle. I know I've heard working in the institutions, they'll never change. You know, working with family violence. You know, I sat on a wife assault coordinating committee from 1990 to 1994 to change the wife assault policy so that the police would charge instead of the women, because the women would never charge. And even then they said they won't change, they won't leave their abusive husbands or their partners. Had to believe that that was possible. And principle number 2 is development comes from within. I talked about that when I had to, in order to do the work that I wanted to do, I had to change within. And it took a lot of work to do that. It says the process of human and community development unfolds from within each person, relationship, family, organization, community, and nation. When I was out there and I see our brothers as I work, because I'm what's called the elder for our program in the institution. I see them, they look at the big picture and they blame, residential school, the way that they grew up. All the things that have happened to us in the world as Aboriginal people. And that's kind of how I was when I was in my, the world was against me. And so I had to change that thought. And I really do believe that, going within through the fasting ceremony, through going into the sweat lodge, the first time I remember going into a sweat lodge, it was went over to Victoria and went to, was very interested in it, and I didn't know what it was, but when they said you're going into the womb of the mother, and I sat in that womb, that mother, and it's the first time I was able to cry. You feel that safety and that connection. And I had to start there and then go back. As I would always tell people that if you heal yourself, the people around you will, your children, your family will heal. And so when I brought this back to my community to develop a child and family agency, when I first went there, not very many people drummed, not too many people sang. One of my late sisters, I call her my sister, she was my Sundance sister. She was one of the only drummers in my hometown, and now I go back and I see everybody drumming and singing. And I really do believe, we start in our organization, which was very much, we would take the foster children out and we fasted. We did a 4-year fast with them. And of course, people said, you can't do that. We have all these, policies and, there's safety issues and all this. And so we brought in elders and the staff. We fasted with them for the 4 years. And it was so healing. And you need to do that. When I went back in my family, when I was sitting up on the mountain in Bearbutte, South Dakota, on the 3rd day I had a dream, and in my dream it was my grandmother, and she wanted me to have a memorial for her. Well, in my community we lost all of our rituals and our ceremonies, and I didn't know how to do a memorial. Well, within my Sundance and Jane Middleton Moss, when I was hearing her, she talked about, we need to revive our rituals and our ceremonies in order to help. And so I went back and when my dad died in 1999, I went back home and I had a gathering and a feast and a giveaway and remembered my father and my grandmother. And not knowing, all I did was bring my bundle like this and invited my family in the community, and we did that. It was invited back to develop that, to do work in my community. I didn't know what I was going to be doing, and this is what I did. I brought my bundle and all the things that have been given to me on my healing path, and I just started to share, and pretty soon the elders started to remember. Oh yeah, we did have a fast. Oh yeah, we did have a song. Oh yes, we did. My grandmother, one of my relatives, she was sharing. My great grandmother said, we used to dance in corrals on the plateau, and I thought, boy, that sounds like Sundance, because I didn't exactly know what was our rituals and ceremonies, and so it comes from within. They say that it's within our DNA. When we were doing our training in the healing arts, we would learn from, Phil would bring in many teachers, but some of the work that we did was Deepak Chopra, and I remember Stephen Covey, I forget what it's called, 7. Anyway, we learned a lot of different teachers from all 4 races, different healing arts from different areas. And when I started to share about that, the elders in that remembered, and I remember them saying, we already have the teachings inside us. We already have the medicine inside us. We just have to wake it up. And so the more that I share and bring in different teachers, in our healing arts training, it says development comes from it within. There's a time that in your development you need to bring people from the outside to help, because a lot of times people wouldn't listen to me, even from my own territory. We used to bring Elder Melvin Grey Bear up from Wolf Point, Montana, Lake Melvin Grey Bear. So, but he said that his people wouldn't accept him in his territory either. But he would come and he would travel many places. He's the one that gave me my name. Just gonna go to the next one. Healing is a necessary part of development. Healing the past, closing up wounds, and learning healthy habits of thought and action to replace dysfunctional thinking and disruptive patterns of human relations is a necessary part of the process of sustainable development. When I think about this, the first thing that we did in our child and family agency was start to introduce healing to the staff. I encouraged them to fast, to come and Sundance. We brought them down to Wolf Point, Montana to the Sundance. We brought them over to Manitoba to the Sundance. We would bring the elders. We load up 13 elders in our van and take off and go down to a healing conference in Campbell River, or So I really believe that healing is a necessary part of development. Bringing outside people in, I remember Minnie Vera Manuel coming up and doing the training and bringing Jade Middleton Moss, or people like that came into the community and helped. But it's very much a necessary part of the development, and the staff, when they're ready, would come along. And I think when I think about the traditional parenting program, didn't know very much about it at all, but they say when you're ready, when the student is ready, the teachers will show up. And when I was doing, back in 1992, I was asked to, by the Squamish Nation elders, to go over there and do a women's sweat. So I don't know very much about, I don't know anything about a sweat. But they wanted a woman to lead the ceremony, and I was saying I'm too young. And they said, no, someone's got to do it. And so I started to do the lodge, and my friend, late Trissa Mahaney, she said that she would help me. And then her teacher from the big house said, you can't walk for these next couple of years, you can't walk into ceremonies because you'll get confused. So that's when my elder late Dave Peranto showed up, and he started to help me with the sweat lodge and teach me the teachings of the Cree Lodge. And it's, as I've been taking my trauma counseling and working with the healing arts training and the different trainings that I've done, I was doing research for our complex trauma. I was reading this psychology journal that said the most effective way to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder was through the North American Indian Sweat Lodge. And I thought, wow, our elders were very intelligent. They knew how we can heal. And I bring all of, when I'm working in the prison, I work with the men, we have sweat every second week. In our program, it's part of, some of them haven't even heard of it, or they don't even know because they don't know that they have that disconnection. And so we bring them into the sweat lodge, and I do this, and I talk about my bundle, introduce them, because they have their own teachings from their community, but you wake it up, because somewhere along the line they've heard a little bit, or it comes from inside. Just gonna go to the next. Justice. Every person, regardless of age, race, culture, religion, must be accorded equal opportunity to participate in the process of healing and development and to receive their share of benefits. Justice has been really, I shared with you that, back in 1990, I sat on that Wife Assault Coordinating Committee, and I chaired a committee for women downtown East Side, all the frontline workers, and what we would do is we would look at the different cases that we were working with, different women, and we would look at the gaps in service there. And things were happening back then. I remember that's when we first started marching, because Picton was, in the downtown East Side, and women were going missing, and there was many things that were not very many resources back then. We started the march, and Better Women's Support Services was the one that was leading the coordinating committee, but they were also leading the march, and they said that I think we need to have First Nation women out in front. And today that march still happens on February 14th, to pray for all those missing and murdered women. And I think over the years, as I've worked with this justice, to be working, I always said I would never work in the federal system, because I always wanted to work in our Aboriginal community. But today, within the prison that I work in, 1/3 of the population is Aboriginal, and young men. Young is my son, my oldest son that passed away, and to be able to, I think part of our ceremony, part of Sundance, when I think about the stick that I picked up in a ceremony in 1994 when we graduated that program, Phil shared that the warriors would stake themselves to the earth to commit to death to protect her. And so when that stick was placed in front of us, we had to pick it up, make that commitment to commit. I commit to death to protect women and children, to stop violence against women and children. That was my commitment. And so it went kind of around the circle as I healed. When I went 2012, when I first started working in the prison, I went to a 13-day intensive workshop on sexual abuse up in what used to be called Sokoluk Lodge. And at the time, it was the first time in my healing that I really counted how many people sexually abused me, and I was 15. It was huge because I'd already gone through a lot of my training in that. But to come around to be able to heal and then work with the men, and some of the men in the prison have sexually abused. And I remember, back in when I was working in the community, I remember I tell them, this is when we make that commitment, we take responsibility, we take ownership of the behaviors that we've learned, we can change. And working in the justice system, our justice system, it's getting farther away from punishment versus rebalancing. Because there's people like me that work in the prison system. We have 28 within our 9 federal prisons in this area, and when I share all of these things to talk about, to take that responsibility, because without accountability and responsibility, we can't change. And I told him, this is the way that I've been able to do that, is by making that commitment that I want to change. I remember the hurt got too much. Nothing could hide it anymore. I couldn't, alcohol and drugs wouldn't take it away. I had to deal with it some way, or I was either going to die or I was going to kill somebody. And the people that I work with in the prison, that's what they did. They killed somebody, a lot of them. And so justice is a big part, and I think about today, we have a lot more with the Truth and Reconciliation, with a lot more people looking at what's happened, or being able to, I know that they heard about it before. There's many of us saying it over the years, but nobody was ready to listen. And I think we've got to a place in our development where more and more people are waking up and opening their eyes. Phil always says that Mother Earth is okay. It's us that need to heal. And if we heal, then all of our relatives, all of our relations will start to heal. No vision, no development. I talked about this one, that it's important that you have goals. It's the first thing that we do in our healing program in the institution. Our program is they need to get goals. What do they want to do? Yesterday, I was at a diversity workshop, and we had, and I can't remember his name, but he's a football player. He was a football player. He's First Nation from Saskatchewan, played for the BC Lions. And his message, I told him, the elder that I was with told him, you need to come in and talk to our young men about it, because we need to have mentors. We need to have people that are role models. Those that have gone through the healing, and they talk about the hurt, they talk about the pain, and they're at a place where they can do that and help inspire our young people. And that's what we need to do in our organizations. We need to be able to do that. We need to be able to be the one that, even within our families, my nieces to look at me and say, I want to be like you. I didn't have that many people I was born in 1960, and I think about it's the first time we were able to vote, and when I looked around, I seen violence, I seen alcohol and drugs, I seen hurt and pain, and today we need to bring people in that can be mentors, that can be role models, that can be elders. And let's go to the next one. It's about vision, the process of human development, stepping into an ever-renewing vision of human possibility. To be able to see that, like I think when I talked about the eagle representing vision, and that our elders say, we never made a decision until we look 7 generations into the future. How is it going to affect our children and our grandchildren? It's really important to be able to do that planning. When Bill was first doing our training back then, he'd never do an agenda, and it would drive Gloria Nicholson was our coordinator at the time, and it would drive everybody crazy that we didn't know what we were going to do, and he'd say, we're on the Creator's agenda. He would say, you can make plans, but we used these principles in every part of our training, and it was sometimes really hard to not have an agenda. But he talks about the 4 world's determinants of health for healthy and sustainable Indigenous communities. I'm not going to go into detail about them, but they're there in your handouts to look for. I use it when I've done proposals, the development work, I've used these determinants in evaluation. So, oh, go to the next. Authentic development is culturally based. I think about, I remember what Phil said about when we're developing, we can't have culture as salt and pepper. And I think that's really important, you know. When I first started working in the institution or even in the community, you know, they'd bring an elder in and they'd pray at the beginning and then pray at the end, and, you know, that was cultural. Well, it's more than that. We have to base it on, it has to be the root of what we're developing, whatever we're developing for our people to help them to heal, based in culture. And I really like in the institution, it's so hard, and we're going to do a sweat lodge ceremony, and there's so many safety concerns, and union and all these things that come into play when we're just going to do a simple ceremony and have a simple feast. You know, it seems so easy. And even within the community, you know, I was working in child and family, and, you know, we're going to have a simple ceremony. Well, there's a policy that says you can't have food, you know, all these things that get in the way. But I really believe that we need to continue to break through those. And I remember in New Westminster, we were bringing in Melvin to do a weepy ceremony, and the fire department showed up and said we can't have, we can't smudge in the building. We're at this place, but we had to challenge and break through those, you know, by, well, we have a right. And I'm always one to challenge a little bit. I think about, as in my own healing, I had to challenge the patriarch, some of the patriarch beliefs that have come into our matriarch systems. I remember when I first started sundancing, and I had gone up to Bella Bella for the gathering of canoes, and I don't know, I think it was in 1994. And I was going through the bush and I found this eagle. And so I had come out as a jingle dress dancer, and I thought, wow, you know, thank you, Creator. And I got my friend who made it into an eagle fan. And I brought it to Sundance, and one of the brothers said, I don't think women use eagle fans as, they're not allowed to use eagle fans. And I said, really? I said, did the Creator come down and tell you that? I said, because the Creator placed this eagle on my, in my path, and you know, I'm using it. And he tells Alden, late Alden Pompana, our Sundance chief, isn't that right, Alden? And Alden goes, who are you to tell one what is right and wrong? And nice. So even within our culture, you know, as we revive our ceremonies and our rituals, you know, there's that influence that comes from, you know, some of the colonization that's happened within our people. Mm-hmm. And even though I didn't know what that meant, you still get this little feeling inside, like, I remember walking in, we were doing we used to have family night with our traditional parenting program in Westminster, and we would bring the drummers in and that, and one of the brothers came to me and said, well, you can't go in there, you're on your time. I said, why not? And so I always challenged it, and I would say, you know, of course today, you know, there's you learn about the respect that we have as women, as life givers. We're able to take care of that energy, and you learn how to take care of your body, take care of your. So as I've gone along in my development, I learn about those things and help people with them as we're to be able to challenge in a good way, and that's part of my job within the federal system. Is I'm always questioning, and knowing what our rights are. It's only been recently that Canada is even signed on to the Bill of Rights for Aboriginal people, and I think it's important to do that, to listen to inside, on our culturally based. Principle number 7, interconnectedness. Everything is connected to everything else, therefore any aspect of our healing and development is related to all others. Personal, social, cultural, political, economic. When we work on the one part, the whole circle is affected. When I talk about my bundle, and when I'm smudging, I say, as a woman, as a giver of life, I smudge my hands to remind me that everything I touch in a good way. Never to raise my hand, especially to my children. I smudge my mind to remind me to think positive thoughts, that our thoughts turn into our feelings and then into our action. I smudge my ears to remind me that everything I hear, I try and hear the good, that everybody that's put on our path is our teacher. I smudge my body and my feet to remind me that wherever I walk, my children, my grandchildren will walk. That I try to walk in a good way. I smudge my heart to remind me that to love everybody unconditionally. I don't need to like their behavior, but I can love them. Then I say all my relations, to remind me that I represent all of my relatives, all those that have gone before. If I dishonor myself, I dishonor them. And when I talk about my bundle and talk about our relationship with air, earth, fire, water, talk about the animals. On my bundle is represented those that swim, those that fly, four-legged. I have different, the little turtle on my bundle, the wolf, that we're related, and whatever we do, that's why I say if we heal ourselves, the rest will heal. If I heal myself, my son before he passed away, he was very much part of all the ceremonies, but all my sons are, the ceremonies that I do or the work that I do, the healing art. I would go up and, they would be sitting in circles where people are crying and screaming and, healing. They grew up with that. My son had just come out of Round Lake Treatment Center in November. But in February, he thought he would do one last time, and he died of fentanyl. He taught me a lot. My son taught me a lot, and I'm able to work with those young men in the prison and be able to see them. When we did, I think an important part of that interconnectedness, reconnecting that fragmentation that's happened to us, is bringing back some of those ceremonies I brought back in our community, the welcoming of the spirit ceremony, to welcome a baby into the world, the ceremony to bring a young boy into being a man and a young girl into being a woman. I brought that ceremony back. They think those initiation ceremonies that we had in our community is really important, that we give them teachings how to take care of your body, how to take care of your energy, how those teachings that we have, why we wear a skirt, why we cover ourselves when we're in sweat lodge. Those things are important teachings to learn, to connect. There's a ceremony for when you are going into your menses, or men are going into that part, becoming an elder. So we need to bring those ceremonies back in order to connect. And I talk about them in the institution with the young men, that naming ceremony. It's important that if that was part of your culture, or if you've lost that, you get someone else to catch your name, because they say that the spirits, your name is there, and whoever's given that name. And my mom, she was getting her name. My name's Blue Sage Woman, and I didn't even know my mom was going to go get her name. And her name's Sage Woman. And so it told me that, it comes from the spirits. You need to be able to do that in order to connect. When we do those ceremonies, just like I shared with you, that we come from the spirit world, that we're pure and sacred, the person is the altar. So if you're doing a baby naming ceremony, then the baby is the altar. My son, when his voice started to change, he went through the fast ceremony, fasted for one night, and he got his name. The child, or that young man now, is the altar. They're sacred. How much time am I getting?
You can go as long as you want.
Okay.
Yeah. A few more minutes if you want.
It started late.
Yeah. It
It's
started late as well, so
Okay.
please feel free.
So no unity, no development. Unity means oneness. Without unity, the common oneness that makes seemingly separate human beings into community is impossible. Disunity is the primary disease of community. My elder fellow, he always says, the most bad medicine of all bad medicines is gossip and rumor. In our communities, and I talk about it all the time, working within the institution with all these young men that have been broken, they're the hardest on each other with what's called lateral violence. I first heard of that with Jane Middleton Moss in 1995 to talk about lateral violence, and it goes on in our community, today within our organizations. We don't need people to oppress us. We become the oppressor, and it plays out in our communities. And I think part of my, feeling that powerlessness and not being able to do anything about it, part of my healing has been to go out and do these things that I do to help develop, when parenting, family violence. For many years I went around and I did workshops for the Justice Institute on one residential school. We did an introduction workshop to get ready for all the disclosures that were going to happen in residential school. And it's all been part of my healing and my development, because sometimes I thought, I don't even know this stuff. But no unity, no development. As you do that, they talk about the crabs in the bucket. When people try and, get out, people gossip and rumor about them, and we got to stop doing that. And how we do that is we stop doing it ourselves. We recognize when we're being part of that, that gossip and rumor, listening to it. All through the work that I've done in development, no matter whether it was for Helping Spirit Lodge, the Desnakai, which means Family and Chilcotin, the Child and Family Agency, we've had lateral violence within the organization, within the community, and within our families, And so a lot of my healing has been around to how to protect yourself from that. And one of the ways that I do that is I bring in many supports. And Phil was always there encouraging me when I'm going, this is what they did. Government in our organizations. When I went through my master's program, I was really excited to hear about social enterprise. And because in our communities, usually, it's the band or the tribal council, or have to oversee our organizations in that, and so they struggle because politics gets involved. And so over the years we've had to look at that and how when we're developing, we're working in the institution right now and we're trying to do, because a lot of the men can't get out and do their trauma work, and it's not safe to do the trauma work inside the institution, so we're trying to develop something to help them within the institution to work on the trauma, and trying to make it autonomous so that there's not interference. And that's a really big challenge that we're working on. But it's the same thing no matter where you're doing that work. No unity, no development. Everybody has to be on board. And we need to set aside our differences.
If you don't mind me saying, I think that's a really excellent principle that people can take from the scope of communities, but also to smaller organizations, workplaces, family units. I think it's fantastic thing to think about.
No participation, no development. Participation is the active engagement of the minds, hearts, and energy of the people in the process of our own healing and development. I remember back in 1992, I was running an employment program, and we brought in one of my co-workers at the time was Sean Atleo, and he brought in his dad to share in our program. And we were asking him at the time, what was our traditional way of making decisions? And and he talked about, we start, you make, you go for consensus. And he talked about within the family, within the community, and then within the nation, and then how we made internation decisions. And Phil talks about it in his medicine wheel, you'll see in some of his development material, that you go for consensus. And consensus didn't mean that everybody agrees. It was, you went with the majority decision, but all of the minority, the ones that didn't vote for it, they went along with the decision. They tried to make it successful. And if it wasn't successful, then they would go to their decision. And so I think that's part of, if you didn't like what was said, and you don't participate, there's no development. And so each time that I would come with some community problem that I was having in my development, I asked Phil, and he would go back to the principles and he'd remind me, okay, and it would help me as I was dealing with problems, whether it be with the government or with the funding agencies, different things to help me with this, with the community, with the leadership. Did I go back? Oh, these are really good principles for consultation. I'm not going to go into them, but anytime that you're doing consultation, and also learning about what consultation is, as they always say, yes, you've been consulted. Well, what true consultation is and how to set that circle up. These are really good principles for consultation to go through, and I'm not going to go into them. The hurt of one is the hurt of all, and the honor of one is the honor of all. The basic fact of our oneness as a human family means that development for some at the expense of the well-being of others is not acceptable or sustainable. And I really, like I said, Phil came in too, and I don't know what year that was that Alkali Lake, the hurt of one and the hurt of all video was done. But we used it in our training. I still use it. If I can show it in the institution today, I still use it. And how we in Alkali came to 100% sobriety. And Phil always asks me, how are they doing now? And say the next generation come up, and the next generation, we still have issues. But I think it's important. I remember we were going to go do our Sundance at a community, and they said nobody can come that's been a sexual offender. And we have to keep in mind that everybody needs to be part of the circle. We can't leave anybody out. And it's important for healing, I think.
I've shared the video with the participants.
Okay,
You can
good.
see it.
Principle number 11, spirit. Human beings are both material and spiritual in nature. It is therefore inconceivable that human community could become whole and sustainable without bringing our lives into balance with the requirements of our spiritual nature. I went down to New Zealand to go to a education conference, I think it's the International Education Conference, and I was so amazed by all the Aboriginal people that shared and spoke down there. But I really remember this one woman, and she wasn't able to come to the gathering, but she was videoed in like this, and she was sharing. But after all the years of healing, it really, really came. I guess I was ready to hear it that day, and she was really talking about. Her traditional territory was a national park, and but the importance of going back there. She talked about it. She was doing a workshop on spirituality, and she talked about the importance of just going back there where her relatives were buried, and for since time immemorial. And it really hit me that was the way that I had stayed connected and connected my children. That no matter how much hurt and pain and I left Williams Lake. I didn't move back there for 22 years. But every year I went back to fish. My grandfather taught us when we were really little kids how to dip. And I would go back to the river and I'd bring my babies in, even in their baby bundle, and sit them beside the river and fish. And I really believe that was part of the connection that I kept, with our river, the water, the land, and even when I felt disconnected, it was part of my healing. And I think about that as spirit, when I sat up on the mountain and fasted. We did those 4 years of fasting for the foster children and our staff, the elders said, that there's a woman who turned to stone waiting for the fast to come back to the people. And I think it's really important that we make those connections. I remember working in, I think it was 1987 at the Friendship Center here in Vancouver, and we brought single moms with their children out to Twin Islands for a camping trip. It's so important to bring them back to the land, bring them back to that connection and that spirit. And in the institutions, we bring them out on what's called ETAs. We bring them up to the land, or we bring them up to the Sundance, or we bring them to a sweat to connect again. And it's really important. This is a good, is it spiritual? Some of the questions, and I'm not going to go into it, but it'll be in your package.
Would it be okay if I ask a question from the
Mhm.
webinar participants? First of all, you're getting lots of really warm comments saying that people really appreciate you sharing your stories, so thank you so much. We have one person who's asking, what do you mean when you say fasting for 4 years?
So in order to get ready for our Sundance, I fasted for 24 years, but 4 days is what we started to fast for. And in our Sundance, we make 606 tobacco ties, and we put them around us. They're prayers, and usually an elder or someone will help us. We go out into the forest and we bring our sleeping bag, and I usually bring my bundle. And we stay out there for 4 days and 4 nights. We go without food and water, and pray. We pray, and we get in touch with who we are. Sometimes I only did 1 day, sometimes I did 2. But I was reading in one of the articles I was reading lately, and they talked about fasting as boosting our immune system. and it's such an important way to cleanse and detox all of the poisons we put in our body today. And so it's really important, and that's when I first started fasting, that's what I do. I would go down to, an elder would put me out for 4 days and 4 nights. He'd fast for one day or one night too. I don't fast, haven't fasted for a few years now. My elder told me I had to quit suffering. But it's really good for you. Morals and ethics. I talked about a little bit about that, and Phil talks about a code of ethics that he's developed with 40 elders. I think it's probably part of your package, so I'm not going to go into that. Qualities for principle-centered leaders. That's a good resource too. Principle number 13 is learning. We're born, it's a lifelong learning. I'll be learning till I die. And I think it's really important to keep an open mind. I like Vera Manuel. She always had this, it was 5 stages of spiritual development, and the final stage, when you get to, as you become getting ready to go back into the spirit world, and you lose all your hair and you lose your teeth and that, to what's called the international human being, where you're open-minded and you accept all races. It's the same as when children, they don't see that, and I think that's where I'd like to be, getting closer. But sustainability, to sustain something means to enable it to continue for a long time. Authentic development does not use up or undermine what it needs to keep on going. As part of my master's program, we had to do a business plan, and I did one on a trauma healing center, and I talked about, I had to look at all the areas for sustainability, and so there's some good development tools out there, but I really I'm not going to get into that one much. Move to the positive. Solving the critical problems in our lives and communities is best approached by visualizing and moving into the positive alternative that we wish to create, and by building on the strengths we already have, rather than on giving away our energy fighting the negative. That's a big lesson. It's hard to, it was hard in the beginning to use this principle, because I like to fight. And even today, it's like, just keep your mouth shut, Corinne. But I think that it's important. I like the way, when we were doing our training, you could actually, if you talk about it and we did a lot of meditation and a lot of visualization in our healing arts, but how you can make things, we talked about, if you're going to you want to become an athlete, and you're a long distance runner, you visualize it before you can happen, it makes it happen. Well, to keep believing that, we're going to be able to heal ourselves, heal our families, heal our communities, and heal our nations. And keep thinking that, and keep putting it out there, because they say that our thoughts are so powerful. That's where our prayers are powerful. I keep reminding the men that I'm working with in the prison, because sometimes when they come in, there's darkness in their eyes, that you can see the spirit, that you can see that innocence, and that we're going back there, that we're letting go of all that hurt. And I think it's important, this principle, that we move to the positive. I could have, I used to develop, work for about 2 or 3 years, and then I'd leave. Because every time you do, you're developing, whether it be an organization or a program or a service, there's a lot of turmoil in the beginning, and you get all the lateral violence and all that stuff going on. it's important to know that it's part of the process. You know, it's the same as when I sobered up and I cleaned up, and there was times when I didn't know what I was doing or where I was going. They say the storm before the calm. Even in our group, when we're doing the beginning of we just did a high intensity program with the hardest of our men. And in the beginning, oh my God, it was so hard because you're helping people to change, and there's so much storm. And I think, why did I pick this? So it's important to be really strong in this principle, be the change you want to see. And so they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And to keep, Stephen Covey says, sharpening the saw, keep developing, keep going, every once in a while in my work, I went to Sakulitan Lodge, I went to South Lalem, I continue to go to healing workshops and that. I continue to learn and go and see elders share, because it's important. And with that, I'm going to say I'm asking for any questions, and I thank you for spending this time with me. I know that Phil's really busy, and he's given you a lot of material that you can use. He gives it freely and openly because over the years, even the Code of Ethics, he talks about the elders that contributed to it. And so he gives that gift to you, and I thank you. If there's any questions.
Thank you. We're open to questions. Please feel free to use the chat box to share. You're mostly getting compliments rather than questions, and
thank you.
See, there's a lot of positive feedback. People thanking you for sharing your story and teachings. People feeling like they have a better understanding of their spiritual and healing path because of the presentation. Someone said, great to hear your personal journey, holding the fort on your own and the principles. Yes, thanks for those comments, everyone. If you have questions, please feel free to share them at this time. We also wanted to share that, sometimes on our healing journeys, we are able to see the positive, and sometimes we also can be, in need of support. If you find that you need to speak to someone today, maybe some of the stories have reminded you of your own personal stories that you would still like to speak to someone about. I will put in the chat box a phone number where there's support of that nature, counseling support. Feel free to call that if you need. And but otherwise, I'm seeing that a lot of people are just feeling very inspired, and that's very positive.
I do have a lot of resources too. I did a workshop for here, and it's probably still online, called We're Healing with a Medicine Bundle. And so I have a lot of resources to attach to that for family violence and working with people in that area.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Corinne. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
No questions, so
we'll
close this session.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, David Anderson, for supporting us with the video conference. We heard some of the participants early on, and we're really happy that they were joining us today. I also want to thank our own team, UBCLC, for all the fantastic work. Davina Ridley did a tremendous amount of work in setting this up, and Stefan Mladenovic helped us with technical support earlier on. Thanks for everyone's contributions, and again, Corinne, thanks for being here today. Oh, we also had a request, Corinne, for someone who wanted you to come back. Come back and have a part 2 to this. And I agree that this is one of the sessions that is very soul enriching, and I feel like soul food. So thanks so much.
Yes, and hopefully Phil will be able to join me here.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes.
That'd be great. Thanks so much. All right, take care.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.